Right. Hi there, everyone. Good evening. My name's Nicole. Welcome back to our English pronunciation class. Today, we are going to be continuing in something very important for effective communication, especially when you want to be respectful and build positive relationships. Now, I am talking about polite informal pronunciation. Now, when we think about being polite, we often consider the words we use, right? So, saying please, thank you, or excuse me is already a good start. But did you know that how we say things is just as important as what we say? And that's where pronunciation comes in. All right. So today I've mentioned we're going to shift our focus slightly and talk about some of the reasons why using polite language, why we use polite language. Now, both in our word choices and our pronunciation, we use polite language, which is very important. Now let's look at the points on the screen. First and foremost, polite language shows respectful communication. Because think about it. When you when you have like someone that uses polite words and a considerate tone with you, how does it make you feel? When someone, when someone is being respectful to you in a way that they use polite words, they use proper tone when saying something to you, how does it make you feel? Well, for me, I would feel valued and respected. I think that would also be the case to you because I believe that using polite language is another way of acknowledging the other person's feelings and, of course, their presence. As you know, it creates a more positive, a more harmonious interaction. That's respectful communication. Secondly, polite language sounds friendly and professional. So, whether you are talking to a friend, a colleague, or a customer, using polite language helps you build rapport and, maintain a positive image, which is very important. And it shows that you are considerate and that you have a good social skills. Now, in professional settings or in your respective workplaces, especially, using polite language is often expected, of course, and it can totally contribute to your success as an employee. Now, can you think of a situation at work possibly where being polite is particularly important, or any situation at workplace that you found yourself using polite and formal language? Any situation? Well, one thing that I can think about at the back of my mind, the very first thing that I can think is when we are speaking to a client. Of course, it is to be expected that we maintain a good and proper image, and we do that by saying using polite and formal language and pronunciation. And another simple thing you can do this just simply, emailing your colleague, emailing your supervisor, something of that situation. Finally, third one, we why do we use polite language? Now, polite language is incredibly useful in public, at work, and with strangers. So these are situations where you might not know the other person well, and you want to make a good impression and ensure smooth communication. Now, in public places like when you ask for help or when you make a request, politeness can really make a big difference in the way that the particular person is responding to you. This is very similar at work, as it will foster a positive environment. That's totally true. That's undoubtful. And this is also true when interacting with strangers. The person you met for the first time, for instance, as it helps to, establish a comfortable and respectful initial contact. Because again, I've mentioned on our previous session that first impressions matter. That's why we try to pose a good and proper self to other people, to strangers, so that they wouldn't get a bad impression to us. Instead, we get the opposite, which is a good one. So, we can see that using polite language is not just about following rules, it has real benefits, especially in our daily interactions or even in professional settings. It totally helps us connect with others, show respect, and achieve, our communication goals more effectively. Now let's connect this back to what we learned about polite pronunciation. How do you think our tone or voice and pace of speaking contribute to showing respect or sounding, more friendly, more proper? How do you think tone and voice and also the way we speak, the pacing of our speaking can really affect our demeanor, our image, our what we say, our polite language overall? Well, yes, those things that I've mentioned, it can totally affect. Say, for example, when we say in a polite language, we use, of course, a gentle tone, and then usually it follows a slower pace, as it will make the conversation or what you are saying with more feelings of like respect and friendliness. So, um, even if you use polite words like please, thank you, excuse me, something like that, if your tone is, abrupt or your pace is too fast, it might not come across as genuinely polite. It can even, worst, it can even possibly come off as rude to other people. Just one word and people will say rude to you, right? So the pronunciation, it reinforces the politeness of the words you choose. That is why we are talking about this, because it's very important. Now, you can imagine this as when someone says thank you to you very quickly, for example, with a flat tone, like thank you, again, thank you, thank you for yesterday, something like that, which is it kind of like they are saying thank you as an afterthought. There's no hint of appreciation in that. So that's how we interpret how that particular person is saying the phrase thank you. Now imagine another someone saying thank you with a slightly softer tone and perhaps a little emphasis, which shows that they really mean it. Say, for example, thank you. Thank you for yesterday. Hello, thank you for yesterday. So you can hear a difference in how sincere it sounds. And that's like the very example of the importance of polite language, because no matter what kind of phrases or sentences you're saying, no matter how polite it could be, if you say it in, not properly, you say it not properly to showcase a polite language, it will not show a polite language. Instead, it might be taken as rude to to your listener. So that is one thing that we are trying to avoid. So pronunciation really adds another layer of meaning and sincerity to our words. Now to again to like summarize, um we use polite language to show respectful communication, to help us sound friendly and professional, and because it is useful in public, at work, and with strangers, or it is useful in various social contexts, especially with those who, if that, especially those with we don't know well, the places that we don't know well, or the various situations that we don't know well, or informal settings, like formal settings. So yes, that's it. Why we use polite language. But remember again, everyone, that politeness is not just about the words we choose, like the what, but also how we say them. Because our tone, intonation, and even our pacing, all of them play a crucial role in conveying politeness effectively. Now, so far, do you have any questions about why we use polite language? Are we all clear with this? If we are clear on this, let's proceed to this one. Following our discussion on polite, why we use polite language, let us let us focus on the practical differences between a direct and polite tone. So I just showed you immediately example sentences to better differentiate the two. All right. As we have established, politeness is not just about, choosing the right words, it's also about how we deliver them, which brings us back to the elements of polite pronunciation, which we started way back previous sessions. Now let's look at these examples of direct versus polite phrasing and think about how our tone and other pronunciation features can change. Take the direct request, help me, for example. It is short, it is direct to the point, but it can sound demanding. Like help me. Hey, help me. Oh yeah, it can sound demanding. Now compare it to the polite version. Could you help me please? Again, could you help me please? Now the addition of the word could, it makes the sentence a question, which is it is more of like a suggestion rather than an order. Now the please here, the word please, we call it the softener. So this is softener. And how would our pronunciation likely differ in here? We would probably use a gentler tone for the polite version, perhaps a slightly slower pace, and there's also a rising intonation and the word please, just to emphasize the request. So that is why it transformed into a question. Like, could you help me please? So the word please is raised. All right. Consider the direct and abrupt response, this second one. What? What? Which is what we usually say when we haven't heard something. We want to clarify something like that. So the polite alternatives are excuse me or sorry. So you immediately sound more considerate that way. Again, think about the pronunciation. We would typically use a rising intonation with both of these, which signals that we are asking for, repetition politely. The softeners here, excuse and then sorry, they contribute to a less, direct and a more courteous tone, which is overall polite. Third one, finally, we have the direct instruction. Give me your ID. Give me your ID. Now, in contrast, the polite request would be, may I please see your ID? Another question. So it uses the word, I think it's a modal verb, may, to, ask for permission, which makes it much less demanding. Now, the word please, again, is another key softener. When speaking politely, we would likely use a gentle tone and a slightly slower pace. And, emphasize the softener please, just to convey politeness or respect. All right. So that is for polite versus direct tone. Let's move on to tips on polite and formal pronunciation. All right. Now that we have a better understanding of why we use polite language and how it differs from a direct tone, let's focus on this. Let's have the first one immediately. Rising intonation practice. Now, as you can see on the screen, we have two examples of polite questions. Notice the upward arrow. Let me highlight it for you, that one. Notice that is, can I, yeah. Notice that upward arrow there at the end of each sentence for a while. It's not highlighting. All right. I think it is. Okay. All right. Now, here, the rising intonation is a very common way to signal that you are asking question in English. And it often, makes the question sound softer and more polite, which is what we are aiming right now. So, um, we do this to sound more polite. So we use this rising intonation so that we can make a question. Let's take the first example. Could I borrow your pen? Could I borrow your pen? Now we already know that using could makes this request more polite by polite when we say instead of saying just give me your pen, you can say the sentence that is shown in your screen. Now listen to how the rising intonation at the end makes it sound even more like a gentle request. Could I borrow your pen? Could I borrow your pen? All right. So my voice goes up on the word pen. That's rising intonation. Now let's look at the second example. Is this your seat? Again, this is a polite way to inquire about a seat. Now, if we said, this is your seat, again, this is your seat, very flat and very fast. This is falling intonation, which is opposite to rising intonation. So it would be a statement. But by using rising intonation at the end, we turn it into a polite question. So we will say, is this your seat? Again, is this your seat? Now hear how the pitch of my voice goes up on seat. So that's the purpose of rising intonation. And that's how we can make some statements, more polite. Now, um, you can repeat each sentence 3 times with rising tone. So let's say these 2 sentences 3 times. Let's run through and read it 3 times. Let's start. Could I borrow your pen? Is this your seat? Again, could I borrow your pen? Is this your seat? Please repeat after me. Focus on making your voice go up at the end. Lastly, could I borrow your pen? Is this your seat? All right, exactly. Now, very good, everyone. You are all, getting the hang of the rising intonation and polite informal pronunciation. So this isn't just for the specific sentences, remember that. And anytime you are asking a question, especially a polite one, try to incorporate the rising tone at the end. So it's a small change in your pronunciation that can make a big difference in how polite and approachable you sound. All right. Next, let's have softeners make a big difference. As the title suggests, um, softeners really do make a big difference in how our communication is perceived. Now, I've mentioned some softeners earlier, right? Like excuse, please, sorry. Those are what we call softeners. So they are words and phrases that we add to our sentences to make them sound less direct, to make them sound more courteous, and, overall more polite. Let's look at the first example. Close the door. That is not that is kind of not polite way to say something. Close the door. It's very flat, it's very fast. It's a statement. So this is a direct instruction. So it might be okay to say this to someone you know very well. Of course, because you know very well each other. But in most other situations, especially to strangers, it can sound a bit abrupt. So let's look at the polite alternative. Could you close the door, please? Could you close the door, please? Here we have added 2 softeners. Could you and please. Let me highlight that for you. Again, could you is considered as a softener phrase, and then please is a softener word. All right. So um we all know that, could you is a modal verb. Could, I mean. Could is a modal verb which can turn something into a command or even a polite request. Now, please is, a classic softener that totally explicitly expresses politeness. So it's a classic softener. It's very common. We all know that. Now, remember our earlier discussion about gentle tone? When saying this polite version, we would naturally, use a softer tone than if we were just saying close the door. Okay. Consider the second example. Wait, wait. This single word can sound quite impatient. Now, the polite alternative here we have is, excuse me, could you wait a moment? Excuse me, could you wait a moment? Again, excuse me, could you wait a moment? Now we've added excuse me to get the person's attention politely. There's also could you to make it a request rather than, a demand. And there's also a moment to soften the directions of wait. Again, our tone and our tone of voice would likely be more patient and gentle when using polite phrasing. Let's highlight the um, softeners here. There's excuse me, there's could you, and then that's main softeners here. Excuse me, could you? Let's look at the response for the third one. I don't know. If someone asks you something and then you replied, I don't know. While yes, it's a truthful statement that you really don't know the answer of the question of your friend, for example, or a stranger, it can, sometimes sound a bit bland or unhelpful. So it might sound rude to other person that is asking something from you. Now the polite alternatives are offered here. I'm not sure, or I'll have to check. So these phrases soften the directness of, I don't know, because it suggested a degree of uncertainty, which is not sure, or, indicating an intention of finding out the information, which is the second sentence. I'll have to check. Now, these aren't, necessarily about pronunciation, but they're excellent examples of how choosing softer words can make your communication more polite. All right. So, from these examples, what is something that you've noticed about the softeners that we used, about the highlighted words? Yes. Yeah. It's from the sentences I've highlighted as softeners, and what we can notice is that softeners often include modal verbs like could, would, may, might. So here, the modal verb used is could. There's also polite phrases like please, excuse me, if you don't mind, something like that. There's also, you can also say, I was wondering, something like that. So there's also less direct vocabulary, like saying not sure instead of, you don't know. And there's also a moment instead of just now. So this one is also a softener for a while. That is a softener. This one's too a softener. Not sure. I'll have to check. I think this one too a softener. All right. Okay. Now, consciously incorporating, applying these softeners into our language is a good practice. And remember to use a gentle tone and appropriate intonation, as we discussed previously, so we can see significantly how it can enhance the politeness of your English communication skills. Anyway, let's shall move on to the next one. As you can see on the screen, contractions are shortened forms of words or phrases where letters are often omitted and replaced by an apostrophe. So we are talking about use of contractions in polite and formal pronunciation. Say for example, we have here I would like, it will become I'd like, and I will becomes I'll. And as well as let me, which we can say as let me. Now, why do you think, or maybe let's just say it directly, why are contractions even relevant to polite and formal pronunciation? You might wonder something like that. Well, generally speaking, using full forms tends to sound more formal and sometimes more polite. So while contractions are more common in, informal or in casual speeches. So it's very important that we don't use contractions as much as possible. Now let's look at the first example. I would like. This is a perfectly correct and somewhat formal way to express a desire. The contracted form is I'd like, which is a very common and in everyday spoken English, and it's generally considered polite, but less than the full form. So you will hear I'd like a coffee, please, very often, rather than I would like a coffee, please. The second example is I will, which is the full form of the future tense auxiliary verb. The contraction I'll is extremely common in spoken English. Like I'll be there in 5 minutes, while perfectly acceptable in most conversations, especially casual ones. But using I will might sound slightly more formal or empathetic. Empha- yeah, empathetic. No, not empathetic, but like emphatic. Emphatic. That's emphatic. All right. The third example is a bit different. Let me can be contracted to let me. Now notice that the slide specifically labels let me as you casual. So this is an important point. While some contractions like I'd and I'll, the previous two ones, are very common and widely accepted too, even in moderately polite contexts, other more focused or other reduced forms like lemme, gonna, there's other gonna, like going to, there's also want to, wanna. So they are generally considered quite informal and should be used with caution in more formal and or polite situations. Now, the key takeaway here is that in situations where you want to sound more formal or particularly polite, using the full forms of words might be preferable to using contraction. So this is especially true in professional settings or when speaking someone you don't know well or someone in a position of authority. Now think about the discussion on the pace of speech. When we use full forms, we might naturally speak just a fraction more slowly and deliberately, which can also contribute to, a more formal, a more polite impression. Now, contractions, on the other hand, it often contributes to a smoother, to a faster, to a flower, no? But like to, faster flow of the speech, which is, typical of more casual conversations. However, it is also important to note that using contractions like I'd, like, I'll, lemme, it doesn't necessarily sound impolite. All right. It depends on the context, it depends on the person, it depends on the conversation. So they're very common and generally accepted. So the key is to be, aware of the level of formality that is required by the situation just to avoid overly casual contractions when you want to sound more formal and polite. All right, enough of that. Let's have the next one. I've mentioned about pacing. Let's look at pace and clarity. So for the first one, it is generally advisable to speak slowly and clearly because think back to our initial discussion on the features of polite pronunciation. A slower pace gives the listener more time to process what you are saying, and it shows that you are, considerate. Now, clear pronunciation ensures that your message is easily understood, which prevents frustration and demonstrating respect for the listener's effort. Now, the second point emphasizes that we should avoid sharp and fat speech. Now, when we speak very quickly and abruptly, it can sometimes sound impatient, demanding, or even rude, even if, our words themselves are polite. So, a more measured pace and a softer delivery tend to come across as more thoughtful and courteous. So, let us practice on that. All right. There's an example below. Um, First is, I don't know. I don't know. Now imagine someone responding to a question with a quick, sharp, I don't know. The speed and the slightly abrupt tone can make it sound dismissive or unhelpful, even though the words themselves are simply stating a lack of knowledge. Now compared to the second example, I'm not sure. I'll have to check. Here, the response is given at slower pace with a slight pause indicated with ellipsis. The softer phrasing, I'm not sure, instead of I don't know, which we discuss as a way to soften a direct statement. It combined with a slower pace and it creates a much calmer and, more helpful impression. So it suggests that consideration and a willingness for you or from you. All right. Here, I think we are all clear with this. So you can hear again the pacing at which our delivery of our words and how it can significantly impacts the perceived politeness. So a rushed delivery, can undermine the polite vocabulary, like Shopee riders or other kind of online shopping platforms where it delivers to your house. So it they should, because there are some delivery drivers that they tend to say fast on something and they tend to not be clear on something. So it's recommended that you or they can have a more deliberate pace and can enhance their feeling of, courtesy. All right. Furthermore, let's have, yes, this one, clarity, which is also crucial. If your pronunciation is mumbled or unclear, the listener has to work harder to understand you. Now, this can be tiring and might be perceived as a lack of concentration on your part, because speaking clearly, enunciating your words properly, it only shows that you value the listener's understanding, and you are making an effort to communicate effectively. Now think about the situations you have had this experience. Reflect on that and try to say the same sentences in a slower, proper pacing. All right. So the idea here is that you should be mindful of your pacing. You should prioritize clarity and you should avoid rushed and sharp delivery. All right. Let's have body language and tone. Well, as you probably noticed, our primary focus has been on pronunciation. Despite that, it is important to remember that communication is often multifaceted, which means that it does not only focuses on verbal communication, like when we speak or write, but it also focuses on nonverbal pronunciation. Nonverbal communication, like body language, and tone, and others. So it can really be helpful for you to know this because body language can really significantly influence how our spoken words and tone are perceived. Body language is that powerful. The nonverbal communication is that powerful. So we try to assess that and make it most of ourselves. All right. Let's look at the first point here. Smile, relaxed face. Smile, relaxed face. So a genuine smile can immediately make you appear more, approachable and friendly. So a relaxed expression, facial expression, specifically, it suggests that you're kind of like at ease and open to interaction. So this positive nonverbal cue can soften your tone of voice and make even formal language feel more welcoming. So you can think about it like if someone has a stern or tense expression, even if their words are polite, it might not feel as genuine. Second point here is use open posture. Now, open posture involves keeping your arms and legs uncrossed. So, facing the person here you are speaking, which who are the person you are speaking to right now, and perhaps even leaning slightly forward. This convey alternatives or attentiveness on their attentiveness on the speaker, the one who is speaking. All right. The third point here highlights the connection between friendly eyes and a soft voice. Now, it meant in physical examination, physical or any kind of communication, even casual ones, maintaining eye contact without like staring intensely. Of course, it's good that you do some eye contact with the other person, but don't overwhelm them. Don't scare them like you are trying to hunt them. Not like that. All right. So, this only shows that you are attentive, that you are engaged, because it signals respect for the other person in there. So let's not specify their names as much as possible. All right. That is for the second one. Third one, friendly eyes and a soft voice. I've already mentioned about that one. So while we have spent most of our time, focusing on the sounds and structures of spoken English, it is really crucial that there is an eye contact because it reinforces there is like kind of feeling of a warmth and sincerity in your communication, which is very opposite to a loud or harsh voice, even with polite words. No, they can be jarring and undermining the intended politeness. All right. Let's have the next one. Body language and tone. Again, body language and tone. I think is this the next one? I see something. Yes, I think. Let me try to see myself on the screen. Yes, it is showing. All right. Thank you for that. Let's have body language and tone. Oh, I think it's the same. I've already talked about this. Body language and tone, we genuinely smile with a relaxed face. There's also using of open posture. There's also friendly eyes and soft voice. So that is on body language and tone, or what we call it as non-verbal communication. Now, I'd like everyone to practice saying both of these, a couple of of sentences in your own. Really, really grateful for the opportunity. All right, let's repeat that after me. What? Excuse me. Give me that. Could I have that, please? Wait. Excuse me. Could you wait? Again. What? Excuse me. Give me that. Could I have that, please? Wait. Excuse me. Could you wait? So something of that sort. You can try to practice this a lot more in your end. All right, let's immediately move on to another. Okay, um that's all for tips on pro, proper polite and formal pronunciation. To review, we've talked about tone that should be gentle and kind. There's also intonation that should be rising for questions. The speed is also slower and clear. The word choice should use softeners like excuse me, please, sorry. And then the body or the nonverbal language, you can smile and you can show open gesture or a way to acknowledge the other person. So that's it. Let's immediately move on to this one. I have a table here. Let's go through each example and see how the pronunciation shift to sound more polite. Let's have the first one. I want a coffee. Very informal, very direct. The alternative polite or formal sentence is I would like a coffee. So use I'd like. Next one, give me your ID. Could I please see your ID? So you add please as a softener, and then you had a gentle rising tone for the last part of the sentence to make it a question. There's also what. Excuse me, sorry. So you say gently upward intonation. There's upward intonation. Help me. Help me. Or could you please help? Could you help me, please? So it softened the command into a request. So something like that. That's the purpose. Last one, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'll have to check. So it is more indirect and it has a polite voice, obviously. So that is another differences on informal versus formal pronunciation patterns. So this chart really nicely illustrates that. Okay. Next, this chart gives us some great examples of how to shift from casual or informal language to more formal ways of speaking. So it is really useful to see the direct comparisons of the two. So let's go through them in a natural way. Just like what we talked about politeness, there's also a difference between speaking casually and speaking formally. So depending on the situation, like who you are talking or where you are right now, you might want to use more formal language because again, I've mentioned that many times already that first impression matters. So let's try to pose a good and proper demeanor to other people. All right. Let's immediately run through this. Instead of saying a simple nice to meet you, it is more in a more formal setting, you might say it's a pleasure to meet you. So it sounds a bit more respectful and professionals. There's also thanks a lot. We can say I appreciate your help. There's also sorry for or please accept apologies for. Don't forget. I'd like to remind you that because in light of the fact that I need some help with, I require some assistance with, as soon as possible at your earlier convenience. Okay. Next, let's have a practice. Let's have a practice reel. It's time to practice. Now we what we do here is I am asking you to repeat these sentences, polite sentences after me. You repeat it after me. All right, let's immediately move on. Let's immediately start this one. I'd like a tea, please. Could you help me? Excuse me, could I ask something? I'm not sure about that. That's a good question. I'll get back to you soon. Sorry. I didn't catch that at all. So that is for that one. Well, this live will always be up on the website. You can try again the different or the various practice drills that I have mentioned or that I have incorporated in this one. Okay. Another one we have here. Um, Another practice reel. I'm just trying to see if you can transform the sentences, which obviously, if you see, will you border something? Would you mind if I sit here? What's up with you? I see your point, but I have a different opinion. They are informal sentences. So you can try to see how you can make these particular informal sentences into a more formal and polite sounding way. Let's have the first one. You bored or something? Uh, no, this sentence is very informal because the phrase you bored, that one, it is a shortened question which misses the verb are, the auxiliary verb are. Now, in formal English, remember, we understand that you would typically say, here, are you bored? Let me type that in for you. Are you bored? So, or that is another or one way of saying something or paraphrasing these informal sentences. So when we say you bored, you can always just say, are you bored? Or are you feeling bored? Now there's also or something. This is a very casual tag added to the end of a question. Now it implies that there's a lack of precision and it is used in relaxed conversation with people you know well. So it is like saying um or whatever the reason might be. Something like that. Like would you bored or what are you doing? Or Are you okay, or do you have any problems, or whatever the reason might be for that particular feeling that you are feeling right now? All right. For the overall tone, the sentence is direct, a little abrupt, and assumes a level of familiarity. So you would likely only say this to a friend or someone you know very well. All right. Next one, would you mind if I sit here? Again, would you mind if I sit here? All right. This sentence is quite formal and very polite because, as you can see, this uses a softener, a modal verb would. Would you mind if I sit here? Now, this is a classic polite way to ask for permission. It is indirect and it shows consideration for the other person's feelings. So instead of saying directly, "Can I sit here?" So we can put it as one the informal, you know, representation of this sentence. You say, "Can I sit here?" Not "Can I sit here?" but like, "I will sit here." That is a question. Sorry for that. "I'll sit here." This is a statement, obviously, as it uses falling intonation. So this is an informal representation of the second sentence. Would you mind if I sit here? All right. So it is, the sentence is respectful still. It is considerate. It is polite. So it avoids any sense of demand if you read it, because it's more of like a question. It's more of a suggestion. It's more of like telling the other person that you could do this, but not necessarily you should do this. That's the idea basically. So it is only appropriate for situations where you want to be courteous, especially with people you don't know well, or in, more formal settings. Next, what's up with you? What's up with you? Now, the sentence is informal. Now, again, not despite that this is a question, there's a rising intonation, but remember I've said earlier that not every rising intonation of a sentence or not every question is considered as a formal. So, what's up? It's obviously a great and commonly used phrases when you want to see how is the particular person is doing. So, what's up with you? The sentence is relaxed. It's friendly. It assumes a comfortable relationships. So they take granted the relationship of the artist to other artists. So, with that, you can use this to your family, friends, to people that know you very well. So let's do that. What's up with you? What's up with you? We can transform it in a more polite setting by asking in a way like this. What is happening? What is happening? Don't forget the rising intonation. All right, next. I see your point, but I have a different opinion. All right. This is this sentence is formal. This sentence is polite. Just just that the other person is kind of like spoiled here. Because if we try to dissect the sentence, we have the first phrase, "I see your point." This shows that you have understood the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree with it. So it's a way to acknowledge their viewpoint respectfully. There's also the word of "but," which just contrast the other. There's also "I have a different opinion." This states your disagreement in a direct but not confrontational way. So using opinion is generally less forceful than saying "I think you're wrong" or "disagree." So the sentence here is very diplomatic, respectful, and it aims to express the disagreement without being rude or dismissive. So it is suitable indeed. So let's have the next one. I'm sorry for that. Let's have the next one. Another practice drill. Rewrite practice. Well, what we did earlier is this just the same. I see your point, but I have different opinion. That is formal. Um, you can type in on our chat, but the for informal representation of this particular sentence. You can just try that. And you can also try always to repeat these sentences for me before or right after our pronunciation class. Okay? All right. Now where do we begin now? That is so foreign of her. So let's proceed to the next one. Rewrite practice. So you try to write formal representations of these informal sentences. Let's have the first one. Sorry. Okay, that one. I'm really glad to meet you. Again, I'm really glad to meet you. For a while, I'll try to, you know, type these sentences on the chatbot. Let me see the chatbot for a while, everyone. Almost there. I'm really glad to meet you. All right. You can see the sentence now in your chatbot. All right, going back. Let's rewrite this formal versions. These informal versions of a sentence. Let's rewrite it to its formal versions. The very first one we have. I'm really glad to meet you. Now it's very informal. Yeah is a very is an informal pronunciation of you. So let's take that as you. I'm really glad to meet you. We can say this as I'm very pleased to meet you. Okay, we can do it like that. Let me highlight it for you. Okay, that's how you try to transform the informal version of the sentence to its formal version. It is complete, no reductions, no no reductions. It's complete because that is the main idea of formal speech, formal pronunciation. It should be complete. And any kind of, spelling, error in spelling, we try to connect it as much as possible. Now, if you've noticed, I've changed really glad to very pleased. So it is because it just sounds more polite and professional. And then I've mentioned about you, just yeah, here I changed it into you. Next, what you gonna do later? Okay, it's very easy. You just follow the flow of the sentence, but in formal choices of word. What you gonna do later? What are you going to do later? That's a formal representation of this particular sentence. What you gonna do later? What are you going to do later? Now, to expand, no, to elaborate, the word watcha here, if you've noticed for a while, let me highlight this one for you to really see the difference. Now, watcha here, that one, the one highlighted, it is a contraction of what are you. these three words on the formal representation. So it is a reconstruction on these three words that form a phrase can form a contraction, which is wacha. There's also gana, which is an informal form of going to. So let's just transfer it to its formal form. So the formal version, it spells out the full grammatical structure, like what are you going to do later. Next, they are not sure if they can come. We can say it as like this. They are not sure. Another word of not sure, not unsure. We can say uncertain. They are uncertain. Wait for a while. Uncertain whether they will be whether they will be able to attend. Okay, this one. Oh, that's not a question. I'm sorry. Should be a period. They are not sure if they can come. So it becomes they are uncertain whether they will be able to attend. Because here the phrase not sure, it becomes uncertain, and can, which uses a modal verb can, it becomes will be able to attend, or clearer, more formal phrasing. The last sentence we have here, it's been nice talking to you all. I know it's been nice to talking to you. Okay. We can say it is like this. It has been a pleasure speaking with you. This is the one. It has been nice. It has been a pleasure speaking with you. So here it comes, it has for formality, token, which is apostrophe. The letter G is replaced with apostrophe. So talking to you, it is very casual. You can say speaking with you, which is its formal equivalent. The nice is replaced with a pleasure for a more refined one. So that is all. Which part of the bakwan you would want to um which part of the sentence you would want to change to make it formal. All right. So that is all for our practice drills. We've had this one, and that one. All right. I think that is everything for polite and formal pronunciation. I hope everything's clear to everyone. Do you have any questions? Again, do you have any questions, everyone? If you do, you can always chat it on our chat bot, and I will try to acknowledge. I will no, not try, but I will acknowledge it and make it clear with you, and address. I will address that pronunciation as much as possible. Do we have any questions so far? While you are thinking about questions, so far, we have already finished pronunciation part 3. We did like 3 sessions for this one because it's a long session. It's a long topic. We cannot cover it in one session alone. To recap what we did for pronunciation part 3, we've talked about suffix endings, ed and s or es, where these particular suffixes are or can be pronounced in 3 different ways. There's also consonant clusters, those consonants that sit beside each other. There's also fast and connected speech like linking. There's also polite and formal pronunciation where which we just talked. I'm sorry, which we just talked about recently or earlier or for today's session. And we've talked about regional accents and variations last meeting, where we focused on 3 apparent accents, English accents: British English, American English, and Australian English. Okay. I think there is no questions. I think everything's clear so far. So, yes, all right, everyone. Another great session for today. We really dug into, a lot of important stuff during our sessions for pronunciation part 3. we talked about the things that I've mentioned earlier and the things that you can see on your screen. So I really hope all of that made sense and gave you, some good things to think about. And just remember, with both politeness and even understanding different accents and many, many more, the real trick is that there's consistent exposure and practice. And the most important thing to keep in mind is that we are not aiming for some kind of perfect uniform accent, perfect English, but really we are just focusing on speaking clearly and sounding natural in English, while also, being open to the wonderful variety in how people speak. Honestly, I am really seeing some fantastic progress from all of you. I'm really glad about that. It's really great to see how, dedicated you are to improving your English communication skills, which includes navigating different ways of speaking, polite and formal pronunciation, etc., etc. So I think that is all for today. Thank you so much for your hard work and participation today, everyone. Have a great day ahead and good night. Also, goodbye. Okay.